I turned 61 this year. I wasn't asking for much, just a peaceful dinner with my son, his wife, and a couple of old friends. Nothing fancy. Just a small celebration to remind me that even though life had been difficult lately, I was still here, still standing. I had cooked meals alone for years after my husband passed, kept my apartment tidy, watered the plants, paid the bills, and stayed out of everyone's way. One evening of togetherness, that's all I had hoped for. The restaurant was trendy. Ashley, my daughter-in-law, picked it. It had those exposed brick walls, dim lights, and servers who acted like your best friend. I smiled, trying to feel comfortable, even though the place was too loud and the chairs had no back support. I hadn't even taken my coat off when Ashley handed me a glossy gift bag with tissue paper puffed up like a cloud. "Open it now," she beamed. Inside was a tiny white onesie. Printed across the front were the words, "Best Grandma Ever." I blinked. "We thought it was time," she said, all smiles and polished nails, "to start planning the nursery. Right, Daniel?" She looked at my son. He nodded slowly and said, "Yeah, especially since we'll have more space soon." "More space?" Ashley leaned in a little closer and spoke sweetly but firmly. "We're just so thankful you agreed, Mary. Not every mom would be this generous." I didn't understand. What had I agreed to? Before I could say anything, Daniel stood up and tapped his spoon against his wine glass. "Can I have everyone's attention for a second?" he said, loud enough for the servers to pause. I thought he was going to toast my birthday. I was wrong. He smiled and looked around the table. Tonight's not just about my incredible mom and her special day. It's also about the future. Ashley and I, we're moving into Mom's apartment. Applause. Laughter. Glasses clinking. I sat frozen. I hadn't agreed to anything. I had no idea what he was talking about. I didn't speak. I couldn't. I looked up and saw Ashley filming me on her phone, waiting for a reaction. Daniel leaned toward me with a grin that didn't feel right. "Right, Mom?" In that moment, everything around me slowed down. The room grew louder, but I couldn't hear anything. My mind went blank. I was surrounded by people, but I felt completely alone. I smiled. I nodded. Not because I agreed, but because I panicked. I didn't know it yet, but that night was the beginning of something much bigger. Something colder. Something that would take everything I thought I understood about love, family, and loyalty and tear it apart, piece by piece. The dinner moved on, at least for everyone else. Conversation shifted, glasses were filled again, and laughter floated through the air. But I sat there in silence, staring at the half-eaten food on my plate that now tasted like nothing. My mouth was dry and my hands were cold. Every now and then someone would look at me and smile like I was supposed to be proud, like I had just been honored with a Lifetime Achievement Award. Ashley talked about how she'd redecorate the apartment. "Oh, we'll brighten it up. Light colors, maybe sage green. Definitely remove those heavy curtains. It needs a fresh vibe for the baby." I heard her say it, but it didn't register right away. Then she turned to me with a fake cheerful tone and said, "Of course, you can still keep a few of your plants on the balcony if you want." She giggled like it was a kind joke. Daniel added casually, "And don't worry, we'll give you plenty of time to move. No pressure at all." I almost laughed. No pressure? They were sitting across from me talking about my home like it was already theirs. They were not asking for it, they were claiming it. Claiming my space, my memories, the walls I had painted with my husband. The place where I raised my only child. And they had told me in public like it was a done deal. I excused myself halfway through dessert. My heart was pounding in my chest. Daniel looked at me with that face he used to make as a child when I didn't buy him a toy, like I was ruining the fun. "You okay?" he asked. "I'm not feeling well," I said flatly. Ashley perked up. Do you want me to call you a ride share? I shook my head. I'll walk. And I did. I walked for 3 blocks in heels I hadn't worn in years. My toes hurt, my legs ached, but I needed the movement. I needed the cold air to quiet the storm in my head. I kept replaying the moment over and over, the look on Daniel's face when he made the announcement. So calm, so confident, like this was all part of a plan. By the time I got back to my apartment, it didn't feel like home anymore. I locked the door, then I locked it again, and again, just to feel like I still had control over something. Their voices were still ringing in my ears. Ashley laughing about my curtains. Daniel saying I didn't need all that space anymore. I looked at the framed photos on the shelf, pictures of my husband smiling, our vacations, our anniversaries, birthdays, and his final moments. Suddenly, those pictures didn't feel like memories. They felt like warnings, like they were trying to tell me something. I sat at the kitchen table for over an hour without moving. My hands rested flat on the surface and I stared at the same spot on the wall. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat still, frozen in the weight of what I had just experienced. They didn't ask. They told. They didn't wait for permission. They made the decision for me. They took what wasn't theirs and they smiled while doing it. But I didn't know the half of it yet. Because what I would discover next would prove that Daniel and Ashley didn't just assume they were moving in. They had been planning it for a long time, and I was the last to know. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind racing in circles. I kept thinking, was I overreacting? Was I being too emotional? But deep down, I knew I wasn't. Something was wrong. Deeply wrong. And I could feel it, not in my head, but in my gut. Kind of quiet voice inside you that never yells, just whispers steadily, you are being used. By morning, I had barely slept a wink. I got up, made myself tea I didn't drink, and sat back down at the kitchen table. This time, I didn't stare at the wall. I opened the drawer beneath the old landline phone. Inside were file folders, ones I hadn't touched since my husband passed away. Legal documents, insurance papers, financial records. I didn't know exactly what I was looking for. I just knew I had to find something, anything that gave me back some control. That's when I found it. A power of attorney form. Signed 2 years ago. My name. Daniel's name. I stared at it for a long time, trying to remember. It was from a hospital stay when I had pneumonia. I'd been weak, hooked up to machines, and Daniel had come in with a folder of papers. Just insurance stuff, he said back then. Sign these, Mom. I'll handle everything. I did sign them, without reading. Because I was tired. Because I trusted him. Because I was his mother. Now, I wasn't so sure. I texted my lawyer, Annette, at 11:53 p.m. I asked her if the document was still valid. The message she sent back the next morning made my blood run cold. If you never wrote it, yes. We need to talk. Urgently. I got dressed in silence, not in my regular clothes. In pressed slacks, a button-up shirt. Shoes that made a noise on the hardwood floor with every step. I wasn't going for a casual visit, I was preparing for battle. Annette flipped through the papers I brought with her brow tight and her lips pursed. This is legal, she said. And dangerous. She explained that if Daniel wanted to, he could potentially use that form to argue that I was no longer capable of making my own decisions. All it would take was one doctor saying I showed signs of confusion. And with that, he could go to court and challenge my rights, especially over property. But I'm not confused, I said. I know, she replied, but the courts don't always wait to find that out. Then she looked me dead in the eye and said, we revoke this today. and from now on, everything goes through me. I nodded. I didn't trust my voice to speak. My hands were shaking, but inside I felt something else, something I hadn't felt in a long time. Anger and clarity. This wasn't a misunderstanding. Daniel wasn't guessing. He wasn't hoping. He was executing a plan. I had just been the last to realize it. After the meeting with my lawyer, I walked back to my apartment. It was just past noon. The sky was clear, the air was calm, but nothing felt steady inside me. I kept glancing over my shoulder, checking my phone, checking my purse, like I had something to hide or something was about to be stolen. When I reached the front gate, I slipped the key into the lock. It jammed. I tried again. Still stuck. My breath caught in my throat. For a terrifying moment, I thought Daniel had already changed the locks. But after a few panicked seconds, the key finally turned. The lock hadn't been replaced, it was just stiff from the cold. Still, I stood there for a long minute, holding the gate open, heart pounding, wondering how close I was to losing access to my own home. That night, I didn't clean. I didn't cook. I sat in silence and made a list. A real list. With a pen and paper. Everything I had paid for in Daniel's life, his college tuition, his wedding decorations, even the emergency IVF fund that never led to a baby. Thousands of dollars. Years of support. Every bit of it given without hesitation. Without question. And now, they were handing me a timeline for my own eviction. But the moment that truly shattered me wasn't a text or a document. It was what I saw online. Ashley had posted a video, a slow panning shot of my living room, acoustic music playing, my bookshelf, my curtains, my couch, all in the background, soft and faded like a farewell slideshow. The caption read, "The beginning of our next chapter," saying, "Goodbye to Grandma's place and hello to our new home." It hit me like a punch to the chest. There were over 30 comments. She must be so proud. What a sweet gesture from a loving mom. I wish my mother would pass something like this down to us. I wanted to scream. I wanted to type the truth in every reply, but I didn't. Because now I understood I was being turned into a character in someone else's story. They were rewriting reality, and I was supposed to just smile and nod and fade away quietly while they staged their happy ending. But not anymore. The next morning, I called my lawyer again. This time, I wasn't just asking questions. I was giving orders. We'll revoke everything. Immediately. I want full control of all accounts, all assets, and I want to protect myself, starting now. Annette's voice was calm, but firm. Then you'll need to prepare for a storm. Because they won't go quietly. They never do when they think they're owed something. I wasn't afraid. I was finally awake. 3 days after that birthday dinner, a manila envelope slid under my apartment door while I was in the shower. There was no knock, no doorbell, just the soft scrape of paper across the tiles. I stepped out with wet feet and nearly slipped on it. I knew, before even picking it up, that it wasn't a kind gesture. And I was right. The front page read, "Preliminary Transfer Agreement, Residential Property." My name had already been typed in. So had Daniel's. So had Ashley's. The only line left blank was the signature line, mine. Attached to it was a typed cover note. The words sounded like Daniel's voice, but I could tell someone else had written it. Probably a lawyer or someone pretending to be professional. It ended with no rush. Just need this signed before Friday for bank approvals. Thanks again, Mom. Bank approvals. That meant they were already using my apartment as a part of their loan paperwork. As leverage. As collateral. They were already acting like it was theirs. I sat down on the edge of my bathtub, the paper still dripping from my hands. My thoughts weren't racing anymore. They were still. Focused. Cold. I texted Annette again. Within minutes, she called me. I sent her photos of the documents. Her tone dropped instantly. This is serious, she said. Do not sign it. Don't even leave it out in the open. Shred it. Now, I said, but they mailed it. She replied, that means they're building a paper trail. If you sign this, even by accident, or they find it with your signature scribbled half-heartedly, they'll use it as proof that you agreed. We're not just dealing with rudeness anymore. This is premeditated. That night, I didn't rest. I pulled open every drawer, every cabinet. I looked through every file folder my husband ever touched. I needed to understand where I stood. Not emotionally. Not personally. Legally. That's when I found it. An old health directive packet from 2 years ago, the same hospital stay when I had pneumonia. Inside, buried between insurance forms and care instructions, was a single sheet that made my heart stop. Limited authority designation. It gave Daniel control over financial decisions if I was declared temporarily incapacitated. And then I remembered. He had handed me that form while I was in bed, tubes in my arms. It's just so I can help with billing, Mom. It's nothing. I signed it. Like an idiot. Annette confirmed the risk. If they find one doctor, just one, willing to say you were confused or forgetful, they can take it to court and argue that you're no longer capable of handling your property. Even if it's temporary, it could be enough to freeze everything. That's when the story stopped feeling like drama and started to feel like danger. They weren't waiting for me to agree. They were preparing to take. From that moment, I knew if I didn't act carefully, silently, they wouldn't just steal my apartment. They would erase me from my own life. But they had underestimated me. They thought I would panic. Instead, I began to prepare. From that day forward, I stopped reacting. I didn't argue. I didn't confront. I didn't reply with emotion. I just played along. That's what they expected from me anyway, right? A soft, forgetful mother. A woman too tired to fight. Someone who'd go along with whatever they decided. So I gave them what they wanted on the outside. Ashley texted me updates about our new home. Daniel emailed me a list of items to remove by the end of the month, complete with suggested dates for handing over the keys. He even included a Pinterest board titled Neutral Nursery Aesthetic. My bedroom was already part of their plan, stripped of my memories and replaced with a crib and a rocking chair I never agreed to. But I didn't scream. I didn't reply. I started documenting. I took screenshots of every message, saved every email, forwarded everything to my lawyer. I bought a locked metal filing box, printed copies of every legal form I'd signed over the last 5 years, and stored it under my bed. I began journaling daily, notes, dates, my physical health, my meals, even my grocery lists. If they wanted to accuse me of being mentally unfit, they'd have to get past 50 pages of clean, time-stamped, logical writing first. I even made fake notes just for the record. One night, I wrote out an entire grocery plan I didn't need just to have more handwriting proof in case they ever tried to forge something later. I wasn't being paranoid. I was being hunted. They were setting a trap. I was quietly disarming it. Then came the visit. Ashley arrived one afternoon uninvited, holding a white gift bag and a cup of iced coffee with my name misspelled on it in thick black marker. "Hi, Mary," she sang as if nothing had ever happened. "I brought your favorite hazelnut cream, extra ice." I didn't smile. "You didn't text first." She laughed, brushing it off. "I figured I'd pop by." "You've been quiet," She offered me the drink, and I just stood there, still. Then she pushed the gift bag toward me. "It's vitamins," she whispered. "Prenatals. We're hoping." She placed a hand on her belly, pretending it had already started to grow. I blinked. "You're pregnant?" She looked down, getting dramatic. We weren't going to say anything yet, but after the dinner, it just felt right. It meant so much that you gave us your place. It felt like a sign. I didn't believe her. Not for 1 second. But I didn't say that. I just moved aside and let her in. She went straight to the kitchen like she already owned it, opened my fridge, and grabbed the sparkling water without checking the label. No caution. No concern. No sign of a woman being careful for a baby she claimed to be carrying. Then she began walking through the apartment, pointing out what she'd change. "This will be the baby's room. We'll knock down this closet. We'll repaint this wall, maybe white and soft blue." I stood still in my own home while she redesigned it out loud like she was flipping a rental. "This bookshelf," she asked. "We can donate it, right? It's a little outdated." My heart paused. "That shelf, my husband built it with his hands 31 years ago." She didn't ask. She didn't care. She opened drawers, poked into corners, and kept saying "we," "are," and "when." And then she made one mistake. While she was in the bathroom, I glanced inside her open purse on the kitchen counter. I didn't touch anything. I didn't have to. Inside was a manila folder. I saw printed floor plans of my apartment with her handwriting marking future furniture placements. There was also a Zillow estimate of the property's current value. They weren't just moving in. They were preparing to flip it. Maybe even to sell it. She wasn't expecting me to notice, but I did. And at that moment, something inside me shifted from quiet defense to strategic offense. Because now I had something they didn't expect, proof. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't pour wine. I didn't curl up and question myself. I sat at the kitchen table with my phone in one hand and determination in the other. I opened a new folder in my photo gallery and titled it simply Proof. Then I added the photos I had taken of Ashley's manila folder, the Zillow estimate, the floor plans, the prenatal vitamins she left behind like a prop. I screenshotted her Instagram posts and Daniel's messages, even their passive-aggressive quotes like "family is supposed to lift you, not trap you." I knew what they were doing now, and I wasn't going to stop them with anger. I was going to stop them with silence and paperwork. The next morning, just after sunrise, I made a call. Not to Daniel, not to Ashley, to Iris. I hadn't spoken to Iris in over a year. She was a retired real estate agent, a widow like me, now spending her days tending roses and ignoring her ex-husband's texts. When she picked up, she didn't say hello. She just said, "Talk to me." And I did. I told her everything. From the birthday dinner to the fake pregnancy, from the old power of attorney to the documents in Ashley's purse. She didn't interrupt. She didn't gasp. She simply said, "You need to get out before they realize you're not playing their game anymore." Iris had connections, serious ones. She offered to help me list the apartment quietly, without public listings, no signs, no online photos. Just word of mouth among private buyers who dealt in cash and confidentiality. "You'll get a little less for it," she said. "But they won't see it coming. And they can't stop what they can't find." I agreed immediately. For the next 3 days, I played the role of the tired, agreeable mother. I liked Ashley's nursery posts. I replied with short, friendly messages. I even posted a photo of my dinner one night, meatloaf and mashed potatoes, with the caption, "Nothing beats a quiet evening at home." Meanwhile, I was scheduling inspections, signing pre-sale paperwork, and secretly coordinating a wire transfer for a small 2-bedroom cabin 2 states away. The place wasn't perfect, outdated kitchen, cracked patio, but it was quiet, private, and completely mine. No Daniel, no Ashley, no more manipulation. The seller, an older man who had recently lost his wife, agreed to sell it off market for cash, no questions asked. We shook hands in silence. That same day I began packing, not boxes, not clothes, documents. My husband's workshop files, our marriage certificate, old photo albums, financial records, anything with history, anything they could try to claim. I called the building manager and requested that no family members be allowed entry unless I gave written permission. He raised an eyebrow but nodded. Then I walked to the leasing office and changed my emergency contact from Daniel to Iris. I changed my mailing address to a P.O. box in the new town. I even called the electric company and set a shut-off date under the excuse of moving in with a relative for health recovery. The woman on the phone offered condolences. I didn't correct her. Every day I kept a calm, polite mask, but behind the scenes I was undoing every thread of control they thought they had. I wasn't leaving out of fear. I was leaving on my own terms. And by the time they realized what was happening, they'd already be too late. It didn't take long for the silence to make them suspicious. Ashley was the first to break. She texted me late one night with a fake tone of sweetness. "Hey Mary, just checking in? Can we swing by this weekend and take some furniture measurements?" Followed by a heart emoji. I didn't reply. 3 hours later, Daniel said maybe Sunday works. Let us know what time is good. Still no reply. The next morning, everything okay? I still said nothing. They weren't used to silence. They were used to control. They were used to getting quick, polite responses. My quiet was louder than any fight I could have picked. That Friday afternoon, I left town. I loaded my most important items into a single van, documents, jewelry, photos, 1 suitcase of clothes, and a tea set I refused to leave behind. I took one last walk around the apartment, touched the walls, closed the windows, looked out over the small balcony where I once sipped coffee beside my husband. And then I left. Iris handled everything else. Within 24 hours, the buyer wired the full payment. The apartment sale was final. My lawyer updated the land records. Daniel and Ashley were legally no longer entitled to anything. The apartment no longer existed in my name. And I was unreachable. No goodbye, no explanation. By Sunday, Daniel was calling non-stop. Missed calls, voicemails, texts that started out polite and quickly turned angry. "Mom, what's going on? Why aren't you answering? We're showing up at your place whether you like it or not. You better be home." They weren't ready for what they'd find. The door wouldn't open. The mailbox had a new logo. The building manager politely informed them that no one by my name lived there anymore. He refused to say anything further. Ashley posted a story with the caption, "Imagine doing something so cruel to your own family." I screenshotted it, filed it away, smiled. Later that week, I got a voicemail I'll never forget. Daniel's voice was trembling. He didn't sound angry anymore. He sounded small. "Mom, why would you do this? You didn't even tell me. We needed that place. I don't understand. I thought you wanted to be part of our future." I didn't reply, because they never asked if they were still part of mine. They thought they had won. They thought they had planned every move perfectly, but they never expected that I would simply walk away and take everything with me. They didn't lose the apartment. They lost access. They lost entitlement. They lost the right to call me when it was convenient and forget I exist when it wasn't. And the best part? I never raised my voice. I never insulted them. I never slammed a door. I simply chose freedom over obligation. After I moved into the cabin, something shifted in me. It was quiet, peaceful even, but it wasn't just the silence outside. It was the silence inside me too. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the weight of anyone else's expectations pressing on my shoulders. No more pretending to be agreeable. No more being the bigger person. No more guilt-tripping phone calls. Just me and the space to breathe. The fireplace was old and a little cracked, but it worked. The kitchen smelled like pine wood. And every morning I sat near the window with a warm cup of tea, watching birds I didn't know the names of and thinking, this is what it feels like to be free. But even in peace, I knew I had one more thing to do. One more act of protection. One more message that would last long after I was gone. I called Annette, my lawyer, and told her I want to update my will. Everything. From top to bottom. She didn't even pause. I thought you'd say that, she replied. I'm ready. It took us 3 hours. We went through every asset I had left. My savings, my pension, a few family heirlooms. I created new clauses, signed updated documents, and made copies of everything. Then I added a note. A real handwritten note to be kept with the will. Nothing dramatic. Just clear. Daniel, you weren't cut out of my will because you wanted help. You were cut out because you believed you were entitled to take. There's a difference. And I raised you better than that. I didn't do it out of revenge. I did it out of peace. If one day he looks for answers, he'll find them in ink. Not in a fight. Not in a courtroom. But in a decision made by a mother who finally saw things clearly. I donated a small portion to a local women's shelter, one that helps widows and single mothers escape situations like mine. The rest I placed in a trust under Iris's management. If I ever needed support, she'd make sure it was there. And if not, it would go toward causes that mattered to me, not toward a Pinterest nursery. Ashley posted one more story, vague, dramatic, and directed at me. Something about betrayal from those you trust the most. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. My actions were louder than her captions. Daniel eventually stopped calling. Maybe out of pride. Maybe out of shame. Maybe both. And just like that, the noise faded. And in its place was something I hadn't felt in years. People always talk about forgiveness like it's something we owe others. But I've learned something far more powerful. Sometimes peace doesn't come from forgiving them. It comes from finally choosing yourself. I don't sit in this cabin with hatred. I don't replay the betrayal in my mind every day. I don't stalk Ashley's posts or wonder whether Daniel will come back and say sorry. Because this story isn't about punishment, it's about freedom. Every woman, every parent, every human being who's been emotionally blackmailed or guilted into silence needs to hear this. You don't have to hand over your life to people who only see your kindness as a tool. You don't have to sacrifice your safety, your home, your future, or your peace just because someone calls you family. What Daniel and Ashley wanted wasn't support. It was power. And when I took that power away, they didn't lose a mother. They lost their target. I am still a mother. I'm just no longer a victim. I am still generous. I'm just no longer blind. This cabin isn't much. The walls are thin. The heater clicks in the middle of the night. There's no dishwasher. But it's mine. Every inch of it is mine. And sometimes I still think of Daniel. I wonder if he ever stops to ask himself what really happened. If he's honest enough to realize the difference between being helped and demanding what isn't his. But I don't wait for his apology, because I don't need it. I got something better. I got my life back. If you're still here, still listening, maybe this story felt familiar. Maybe you've been the quiet one, the one who gave and gave until the people you loved began treating your kindness like a weakness. Maybe you've smiled through the pressure, nodded through the guilt, and stayed silent while others took more than they ever gave back. And maybe, like me, you've been told to be the bigger person even when it felt like the world was standing on your shoulders. But here's what I've learned. Being the bigger person doesn't mean being invisible. It doesn't mean letting people walk over you quietly. It means knowing your worth and refusing to hand it away. Family is not about blood. It's about respect. It's about boundaries. It's about love that doesn't come with a price tag or a property demand. You don't owe your life to people who treat your sacrifices like their entitlement. You're allowed to draw the line. You're allowed to walk away. You're allowed to protect your peace. I didn't sell my apartment out of anger. I did it out of survival. I didn't cut my son out of my will because I hate him. I did it because he stopped seeing me as a mother and started seeing me as an opportunity. And when that happens, you don't just lose your place in someone's future, you lose your dignity in the present. But only if you let it happen. So if no one has told you this before, let me be the first. You're allowed to start over. Even if it's late. Even if it's messy. Even if it hurts. Because your life is still yours. And sometimes the most powerful way to heal is to finally stop waiting for their apology and start living like you never needed it. If this story touched something inside you, if it reminded you of moments where you stayed silent to keep the peace, then let this be your reminder. Your voice matters. Your space matters. You matter. If you've ever felt taken for granted by the people who should have protected you the most, tell us in the comments. We read every single one. And if you believe that no one should ever have to give up their home, their peace, or their dignity just to be loved, then help us share this story. It might be someone else's turning point. And if you're still here, thank you. You didn't just listen to a story. You honored someone's truth. So stay with us. We tell stories that speak to your soul, one truth at a time.